All right. So it started. Okay. Okay. So yeah, like partnerships, emotional regulation when it comes to partnerships is extremely difficult for me. And I'm sure a lot of people deal with it all the time because there's when you're by yourself, there's very little, like you're kind of basically in control of all the situations. Like you decide what you're going to do during the day or in the next hour. You're going to, when you wake up in the morning, it's the only person that you're really thinking about and concerned about is yourself. So
Mm-hmm.
you don't have to, there isn't the other half, or in certain situations like myself where it's not just my partner, it's two other animals that, like, so there's multiple, you know, human or not human beings, multiple beings that are in the house that I have to
Mm-hmm.
look after. I can't just ignore them thinking it's just going to be her taking care of them. And then there's like all these unknowns and these variables that come into play. And for someone who, like, I never lived with anybody up until her, and it was a very big learning experience in so many ways because I would just, it was always making dinner for myself, doing laundry for myself, never having to think, oh, is there somebody else doing laundry, right? Like it's kind
Mm-hmm.
of like sharing and planning and having time management with another person where, and if you get overwhelmed, you have to it's not, you can't just like go and hide in your room or sit there and just let it and wait until it goes away.
Yeah.
If you've got responsibilities or if you have something that you have to take care of, you have to find a way to work through it. And when you're like with poor emotional regulation skills, it's like the simplest thing that can come up, like maybe a disagreement or a fight or something, or she thinks that something's different or wrong, or that you've done
Mm-hmm.
something. Now all of a sudden, right, it's that whole rush of multiple thoughts in your head. um, I'm sure, like myself, there's the worst case scenario, that
Well, I
always
think
seems
some
to
of that
come
is
in.
the rejection sensitivity dysphoria
Yeah.
plays a big part in that too, because now you're having to worry about what that other person thinks about the
Yes.
situation, how they feel about the situation, and if they're blaming you. And then there's also, like for me, I wasn't diagnosed until I was 37. So it's been almost 5 years now. So my whole
Yeah.
life, you've got that baggage of at least, never doing anything right, never living up to your potential. And all of that carries forward. And now all of a sudden you think that's what's happening again. Like,
Yeah.
you didn't think of that person when you were stopping to pick up a snack, and now they're mad because you didn't think of them. But it's not because you don't care, it's because you just didn't think about it.
Yeah.
Or because,
Absolutely.
you know, you went ahead and did laundry but didn't do theirs, not because you didn't care, just you didn't think about it because you're
Yeah.
not used to thinking about it, or because we have these one track minds and then we get distracted, or maybe you meant to do it and you got distracted with 5 or 10 or 20 different things.
Yeah, exactly. It's funny, in the time frame from when we talked till now, a lot of really good examples has occurred. Uh, um, I had I had Christmas dinner at my place with my family, and her brother came over, and so there was a pretty decent gathering. And I remember she she did a lot of the cooking. I did some help because she, she's really good at prepping all the different foods all at once. And it was a lot of
Mm.
work. And the turkey hadn't quite finished yet. And we were thinking it had been done, I don't know, about 40 minutes earlier than what it ended up being.
Mhm.
And I remember going to her, and I was like, I had a thought in my mind that I was trying to time everything in a way so that we wouldn't run out of time later on in the evening, because dinner was already going to be at 6:30. And there was the thoughts of like my family being leaving at about 9 or so.
Yeah.
So wasn't that long. So I went up and said, hey, I'm going to open my stocking right now. And is that, that fine? Oh, it should only take 5 minutes. Oh yeah, sure. No problem. What happened is it, it just kind of, instead of it just being a stocking, all of a sudden it was like all the gifts, like the ones that my family gave me and the ones I gave them.
Yeah.
So we were opening them all up, and I forgot to let her know or make sure it was okay. And it ended up going from 5 minutes to 15, 20, and dinner was completed and ready to go. And she came out and noticed that we were sitting around just kind of
Yeah.
chatting. So not only did I forget to tell her, we kind of all completely forgot that there was still stuff to do. Like like
Well,
we
you got caught
weren't
up in the
nobody.
moment.
Yeah.
It's like it's one thing led to another. Oh, there's stockings. Oh, well, hey, let's just go ahead and open the presents. And then you
Yeah.
didn't do it on purpose, but your
No,
brain is,
exactly.
you know, on the next big shiny thing and not thinking about what's going on in the background.
Yeah. And that was the thing, is that I had a thought, like I had multiple thoughts in my head, and the one that I thought was going to be very helpful and that she thought would have appreciated was the fact that I figured, okay, well, instead of waiting till after dinner, which we don't know how long could take,
Mm-hmm.
because, people talk and things occur, and before you know it, an hour and a half could easily
Mm-hmm.
disappear. And I've like, well, okay, we'll get this done. There's going to be more situations where there's going to be other people doing theirs. She has to open hers. Her brother and her niece have to open theirs. So we're going to run out of time if we let this
Mm-hmm.
all wait.
Yeah.
So I had that idea, and I was like, "Hey, this is perfect." But I didn't even think to say anything. It was like I got into the idea, but I didn't think, "Oh, okay. Well, let's let her tell her and say, okay,
Mm-hmm.
we want to do this because we realize we're gonna run out of time if we don't." And then everything would have been fine. But of course, you get so into things that you don't think about other aspects of
Yeah,
all
it's like the
those kind of like
dopamine
rules,
kicks
right?
in
Yeah.
and it takes over. And then it's like, oh, crap,
Yeah,
I
exactly.
forgot. Or I should have done this. And even though you know you should have done it in the back of your mind, and you probably even thought about it, it's just in that moment, your head's not there.
Yeah. And that's a common thing, is
Yeah.
you get caught up in something, or you start one, and then you get an idea in your head, and it can take over so quickly. And then before you know it, you see something that reminds you that you were on another task, or you're
Mm-hmm.
doing something else. And
Yeah.
then you automatically go, oh, right. And so you either start to kind of, like, I have a few times where I'm kind of walking around in a circle in the kitchen because I can't quite decide. Like oh, I want to go here. Oh no, I got to do that. Oh wait, no. And then
Mm-hmm.
I have to stop myself and go, okay, just hold on a sec. What am I doing?
Yep.
And
I
then I
did
can,
every
right?
time I do unload and load the dishwasher, I do that every single time. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
am I putting this up? Am I putting that up? Wait a second. Wait, what was I doing? What's this on the
Yeah.
floor? Wait, no, that's not what I was
Right.
doing.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. And that's always happening.
Yeah.
But lately, see, I actually, okay, I did an episode just yesterday, and it's coming out. It's in regards to ADHD, so it actually came out today, as a matter of fact. And I was discussing how ever since for the last couple of months or so, I've had really high stress levels, and my anxiety's been high and getting
Yeah.
overwhelmed a lot. But in the last 3 weeks, it's been really low, and personal situations which have occurred,
Mm-hmm.
I've noticed that my level of stress and anxiety and everything has been way down, like just so low. I can't remember the last time it was this low. And I noticed that suddenly I was having an easier time doing things.
Oh
Like
yeah.
right? Like I was remembering things much easier. So instead of getting overwhelmed and like, oh, where does this go? Oh, what do I do next? Oh, do I have enough
Mm-hmm.
time? I'm going to run out. All of a sudden I'm like, everything, doing things in a natural order or in a logical order, step by step, felt almost like it was, I could do it. Like there was no hesitation. There wasn't
Yeah.
no stress or anxiety behind it. And I was able to change life day-to-day skills.
Mm-hmm.
It was amazing how there was like way more motivation, way more control. The emotional side of it was nearly non-existent, and it was such a nice refreshing feeling because
Well, yeah. I mean, your
in
body's not
yeah
flooded with those cortisol hormones that
yeah
are messing with your dopamine uptake and everything. And so you're not in that flight or fight or freeze
yeah
mode. And you're able to think more clearly and your executive functions are going to work better.
absolutely yeah. And so the title of the episode it might be time to reevaluate the severity of what my ADHD is, because
Mm-hmm.
I used to think that it was pretty bad. Like it would take nothing to forget something, or I would get overwhelmed, and then next thing you know, I'm 20 minutes late on making dinner because I got too involved in something that I shouldn't have, or I
Mm-hmm.
got carried away and I was working too hard, and so this ended up happening. Now all of a sudden, it's like that ability to think and make the right choices has just it just comes.
Yeah.
There's nothing behind that influencing it in any negative way. It's all it just it's kind of like feeling like a neurotypical to some degree, you
Wow.
know. Like it's not perfect. There are times
Yeah.
that I still forget stuff, or I the worst is trying to get out the door to go to work.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure tons of people who with ADHD have that issue where they're trying real hard to be organized and make it
Oh yeah,
simple,
I feel like it doesn't
right?
matter how early I
Yeah.
get up or how early I leave the house. I'm still getting wherever I'm going at the same time.
Yeah.
It's like I could get up at 7:30 with the intention of being to work, or like 6:30 with the intention of being at work at 8 and still get there at 8:30, 9 o'clock,
Yeah. Yeah.
because something comes
Exactly.
up, something happens, and then it's the getting out the door. Oh crap, I forgot my phone. Getting out the door. Oh crap, did I close the garage door? All of those
Yeah.
things all the time. But if you've had those couple of weeks of clarity, I mean it might be, but like your podcast is called Living with ADHD and CPTSD. I mean, CPTSD has symptoms that overlap with
Yep.
ADHD, but then also, anxiety and stress and depression, they all do too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it's a it's so difficult to take, like, if you're able to put it up on a wall or on a chart or something,
Mm-hmm.
it's very difficult to be able to pinpoint everything and separate it and label it, right? Like
Yeah.
I don't know if you could truly just label everything and say, all right, that's a definite ADHD, this is a trauma. Like because like you said, it overlaps the symptoms.
Yeah,
They
and two, I
can
mean,
mix
the other
in.
thing is a lot of people with ADHD have trauma,
Yeah.
especially
Yeah.
those that go a lot of their life undiagnosed.
Yeah. That's
And
exactly.
it's hard because then you're like, well, do I have I always had ADHD, or is it because of the trauma? And
Yeah.
like for me, I think what helps me realize is the fact that it's hereditary, and I have family members that are exactly the same way, so then I can kind of tease that apart. But if you don't have that, or you don't, because, just because you have ADHD and somebody else doesn't, what it is, it's like your family member might be bipolar, or, something else, have anxiety or severe depression, and it can manifest as something else later in the genetic history. I mean, it's like, it doesn't have to be one or the other. But what it
Yeah.
has found is that ADHD does a lot of times run in families. And when you have it, your kids have a 30% chance of having it.
Yeah.
So for me, that's how I'm able to at least tell the difference and have some kind of a baseline. And I've been able to kind of tell a little bit more what my anxiety is versus what my depression is versus what's my OCD and trauma.
Mm-hmm.
But so many of those symptoms do overlap. And that's kind of where have you ever heard of the ADHD iceberg?
Yes. Vaguely,
So
I
it's
have
kind
seen it.
of like those top symptoms, like the primary hyperactivity and just the impulsivity and all of those things at the very top. But then there's this whole cluster of symptoms that you don't really see, or people don't really talk about under the water. And it's a lot of those that are overlapping with things like anxiety and depression and trauma and all of the other things.
Yeah.
So it is very hard. And I think that's why so many people have been misdiagnosed over the years too.
Absolutely. Oh yeah. Yeah, I completely agree. The number of misdiagnoses is probably quite high, like because there's the limitations of what they know about not just ADHD but
Mm-hmm.
CPTSD has really affected it in a like incorrectly.
Yeah.
So many people that grow up with in families or with people who are abusive, whether it's physically or verbally,
Mm-hmm.
mentally, and they start having a lot of symptoms that are like initially people are going to think that they're showing ADHD symptoms. They're always forgetting, or they're having problems focusing, and
Mm-hmm.
or they're
Well,
just
and
getting
two, though, I think
distracted
it
a lot.
depends on when the trauma starts too.
Yes. Yeah.
Because if the trauma starts while your brain is still developing, then that can become ADHD as well, because
Yeah.
that's all in your frontal lobe and it's basically stunting that growth.
Yeah.
And I mean, a lot of studies have shown that when you look on average at a neurotypical frontal lobe versus on average people with ADHD, their frontal lobes are smaller.
Yeah.
They don't function the same way. We don't reuptake the neurotransmitters the same way. That's why the medications work the way they do.
Exactly.
And with
Yeah.
CPTSD, that's a whole, I mean, you look at brain imaging, that's a whole different set of brain imaging. Because an ADHD
Yeah.
image and a PTSD image, they're different. There are some overlapping imagery that's similar, but they're still different too.
Yeah. It would be nice to see someday have a person who has CPTSD have an MRI, like a detailed MRI,
Mm-hmm.
and I know it's not wouldn't be fair necessarily to cause a trigger or to have them re-experience it, but
Yeah.
for the sake of studying it, it might be something that could be looked into, because
Mm-hmm.
you need to know, like they need to see the signs of it. They need to see what effect it has on the brain. Because it's like it's obvious out there. There's still very little known in such depth. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's still very surface level as
Oh,
far
yeah.
as knowledge and research.
Well, I mean, when you
And
think about it too, the
yeah,
brain imaging and what we know about the way the brain works is, in comparison to history, medical history is new.
yeah,
It's very new. And I mean,
yeah,
even a
man.
lot of these, ADHD wasn't even really a thing that was looked at seriously among all sexes, all ages, all groups until maybe
Yeah,
what, the last 10 years? Even because
yeah,
when I was in school in the 90s, it was still something that boys had because they couldn't sit still and they were out of control. They never talked about
right.
girls having it, never at all. And it was always the hyperactivity that was the focus. And it's not until recently that it's become okay, well, you can have combination symptoms,
Yep.
or you can have the hyperactivity symptoms, or you can have these inattentive symptoms.
Yeah.
And, things like social media have blown up people's awareness to it, and so many more people have been diagnosed. Obviously, there's going to be some outliers where people are misdiagnosed, but at the same time, people are like, wait a minute. Like the book says, maybe I'm not crazy, lazy, and stupid.
Yeah. Exact. Yeah. I know it. I see signs every day with people, right? Like, and it's interesting with the understanding that I have today compared to when I first started
Mm-hmm.
any sort of research. It you kind of you it's like I can immediately, I can't obviously give a diagnosis, of course, because I
Right.
don't have that sort of
But
knowledge
you can
and
tell.
degree. Yeah,
It's
exactly.
like you
You can
know what you're
tell.
looking at anymore. It's like, okay, I'm not alone. I
Yeah,
see myself in this person. They're probably like me.
yeah, Uh, yeah, exactly.
I mean, I was
And
on
it's
a
so common.
call with somebody from Johnson and Johnson, and we were talking about autism, and she stopped me on the call, and she's like, because we got to talking about sensory issues,
Right.
which is something that ADHD and autism share. And we were talking
Yeah.
about all of our, back and forth about who our individual sensory issues. And she's like, "Are you sure you don't have autism?" I'm like, I wasn't ever tested, so I don't know. But that's something else. I mean, that overlaps. And then that's another thing is that, okay, well, yes, all of these things overlap, but I think ADHD is also kind of on a spectrum because you have
Yeah.
people who can get by without medication, that, diet and changes and exercise work for them, which is
Yeah.
great. I wish it worked for me like that. And then you have those that will be able to do medication and they're great. And then there's those who can't do any of it and it doesn't work for them. None of it works for them. They can't take the
Yeah.
medication for whatever reason. They've tried the diet and exercise and 1,000 different productivity tools and none of it helps. So I feel like it's kind of on a spectrum too.
Absolutely. I agree with you because I I can't remember if I discussed this with you the last time, but I knew someone briefly who has ADHD, and the severity of their ADHD was quite noticeable,
Mm-hmm.
and it was more of a physical thing necessarily than a mental disability.
So maybe more
Be-
hyperactive.
yeah, like it was a hyperactive, and now with my understanding of it, I'm pretty certain that she was a hyperactive diagnosis because
Mm-hmm.
you could just see the symptoms and the signs of it were very obvious, like the inability to focus and
Yeah, I almost
constant
feel
moving.
the people that I've known that are hyperactive, it's almost like you can feel the energy vibrating off of them when you're around them.
Yeah,
And I have the impulsivity. I'm kind of combination. So I have the impulsivity, but I don't have that hyperactivity. I'm more inattentive. And sometimes I love some of my hyperactive friends, but I can't deal with that level of energy.
right.
It's just so hard and it's like it just buzzes off of them, so it makes me understand And just about every one of them was into sports in school, the ones that weren't diagnosed until later. So that makes sense to me, because if you're heavy into sports in school, you're kind of wearing yourself out, and you're able
Yeah.
to focus more because you're expending that energy.
For sure.
But it
I know.
is, yeah,
I
it's
think,
visible.
yeah, absolutely. Like I could tell, like even if I hadn't have gotten an official diagnosis, I could have told anybody that I could say 80% on the inattentive side. And it's
Hmm.
because I'm not really that of a hyper person. Like I have impulsive issues, but it's not with moving around and
Hmm.
doing things that other people go, what the heck is he doing? It's more to do with the inability to resist the craving, right? Like
Hmm.
you like I oh my lord, last week my TV is starting to act up a bit, and I was like looking at deals and thinking, oh, I got to buy a TV, I got to buy a TV, and
Hmm.
but I'm like sitting there going, okay, I'm not going to spend a ton of money. I realize that I can't do that, but maybe I can find one that's really cheap and good price, but it's good quality. And I literally was in the store looking at it, going, should I? Should I? Oh, I don't
But
know.
then
I don't
there's that voice.
know.
It's like having the devil and
Yeah.
the angel on your shoulder, but the devil's louder.
Yeah. And amazingly enough, I was able to tell myself, no, don't do it. There are other ways of doing this.
Hmm.
And I showed myself, hey, look, I have the ability to make the money that I can put away for a bit and then get one.
Hmm.
And then I'm not making a debt, or I'm not taking money out of my account that I should be saving. It's extra money. No, it's no big
Yeah.
deal. And I was able to walk out the door feeling good about it, and not going, oh my god, why didn't I buy it? Like it's like I had that control.
Yeah.
And the thing is a month ago, I don't know if I would have been able to do that. I am not sure if I could have walked out of there without doing it, because and that's the other thing about with the stress and the anxiety, is that
Hmm.
it's like I was so stressed out and I had so much anxiety in my system. It was like there was that extra need, that extra urge to get some kind of a hit, right? Like I
It's that
wanted that
dopamine.
dopamine.
Hmm.
Yeah. And what I was doing, it wasn't going out and buying new toys or anything. It was eating, like stuff that made
Oh
me
yeah.
feel good. And that's
Oh
how I
yeah.
was taking care of it.
I have a really hard time
Yeah.
with that. I get these really horrible cravings for something sweet,
Yeah.
especially like specifically cookies, like chocolate chip cookies
Right.
or ice cream. My mom's the same way. She has her pre-dinner ice cream, her post-dinner ice cream, and then her dessert ice cream.
Uh,
So me and her are like the same. And,
yeah.
I can try and tell myself I'm not going to do it. And then I'll be in bed and I'll start getting antsy, really antsy, and not able to sleep and toss and turn. And I'm like, I need something. I need to go get it, or I'm not going to be able to sleep. And like, even right now, I have nothing upstairs. And it's been in the back of my mind this whole time. Okay, like after this episode, I'm going to run to Walgreens and get some cookies because we
Yeah.
don't
Yeah.
have any in the house. It's just
No
always
kidding.
there.
Yeah. I know the feeling. I know that feeling. I used to be that way when I was younger, before I hit my relationship, and I was able to control it, and I did so well. And
Mhm.
then when everything just went horribly wrong, and I was stressed out all the time, and I could never relax or feel comfortable, it started to come back.
Yeah.
And it's only recent where it's finally, like, it's becoming the way it used to be. And it's not perfect, obviously, because there's always going to be that need. Like, you get bored, and next thing you know, your brain's going, I need something. There's something I got to do to cure this, and it was either go out and get something to eat or find something that was really interesting to watch, and yet that was hardly ever good enough, because it was constantly going, oh, this, I don't want to watch this. I've seen this already. Like
oh God, yeah, I could spend an hour trying to find something to watch and not find anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then once I'm into something, I'm vested. I need to watch it 24 hours a day until it's done. And then once it's done, it's like having a withdrawal. Like, what's next? What do I do now?
Yeah, no kidding. I know. I think I've managed to control that more or less. My problem is not being able to find anything that's good enough. Because even if I get into it, I can get in 40 minutes, and if it even for a moment starts to just go downhill,
yeah,
it takes nothing for me to switch and say,
but then you're out. Yeah, once you're out, you're out. It's like, I can't.
Yeah.
Like, oh, maybe I should finish this, but then you can't ever go back to it.
Yeah.
It's like there have been so many shows where I was vested for a season or two, and then all of a sudden it's just like, no, I'm done.
Yeah.
Habitually watching it every single time it came out, and then all of a sudden it's just one episode was crap, and it's like, I don't care anymore.
Yeah, I've had that. It just, you get that, like you said, there's that one episode where things in the show suddenly just kind of, it doesn't feel right, and now you're starting to lose interest, and then it takes nothing for you to just stop.
I mean, it could be something that's cringy or just too predictable or too boring, or I can't believe they did that with that character, and then poof, gone. See you, bye.
Yeah. I know. It's
so funny.
Yeah. It is.
It's like things that you think are just so weird that you're the only one that does it, and then once you start finding people that have ADHD and talking about your quirks, then you realize, okay, wait a second, I'm not so crazy.
Yeah, I know. I don't know too many people in person with it, but all the people that I've talked to online and doing interviews with my show, and not just people with ADHD, but different strengths. Like some people have it in a different way more than others, and then there's others that have it like it's the wide variety of symptoms that everybody has one that's super strong more than another, and it's different with and it's interesting and quite fascinating watching them like interact with each other, and then you find out like they all have these similarities, but yet that one has such a higher problem with this symptom, and then the other one is different. It's like they can all feed off of each other, and it's amazing how it works.
It's like if you put us all together, we'd be one whole person.
Yeah, because we'd all have our own strengths and our own weaknesses.
Yeah, and it's funny. It's like the one thing I have is the OCD and the ADHD kind of play off each other in such a weird way. And Justin Timberlake once said, try living with it. And I'd never understood what that meant until I was diagnosed. And then I started looking at it and researching it. And it's kind of like that, how one person has a strength here and then another there. But when I'm medicated and the ADHD is down, then my OCD is up. But then if the OCD is down, then my ADHD is way up. So it's like this weird teeter-totter.
Yeah. Interesting.
But I think we got sidetracked.
Yeah.
I think we were talking, I know
we may have,
about emotional dysregulation, and then
wow, good old ADHD there.
Squirrel.
There's a perfect example, folks, of what ADHD does. Okay, so partnerships, and then emotional regulation. Boy.
Yeah, I mean, you had given the example of Christmas. I mean, I think where it shows up with me a lot is because of the RSD and because of the trauma and all the other things, fun baggage I carry with me. When my husband and I are having a conversation or even a disagreement, my brain shuts down.
Mm.
And it's like things will play in my head, but they won't come out of my mouth. And I can't make them come out of my mouth.
Yeah.
And then he thinks that I don't care or I'm ignoring him or not listening. But I'm trying to be focused on what he's saying. And I'm trying really hard to focus on not interrupting, because that's a problem that we have. Because I
Absolutely.
do, with people with ADHD, it's not that we're trying to be rude. It's that it's like we kind of anticipate what you're saying. And it's like if we don't get it out, we're going to forget.
Yeah, 100%. Right.
And
Yeah.
it's like, I've got to get this out now, because if I don't, it's going to be gone and I'm not going to remember it. And then it's going to be too late. And so we just spit it out.
Yeah.
But he hates it
Yeah.
because it's rude. And I get it. I get it so much. I get it. But I try to focus so hard on what he's saying and not interrupting that I can't formulate thoughts.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, I can't, it gets me, it overwhelms my brain to the point where I'm like, I can't talk about this right now because my brain can't catch up enough
Yeah.
to formulate full thoughts and sentences to be able to talk to you. And then that's frustrating for him because he's ready to talk, because his
Mm-hmm.
brain's fine. He's ready to talk about it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
mine is
That's, yeah.
just frozen and overwhelmed by trying to focus on these two things.
Mm-hmm.
And then then it's worse, because then if you're really upset, then you just spew things and you don't really know what you're saying. And then later you've got you get the rumination where you're like, well, maybe I should have said that this way, or I should have said this, or I should have
Mm-hmm.
done it this way.
Yeah.
And then your RSD is kicking up again. And you're like, and it's like this, it's just a
Yeah.
vicious cycle.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. It's funny. You described, I don't know, hundreds of situations in my life exactly the way it's happened, and I'm thinking about all the examples of where that has happened, where I'm having a conversation with her, and it takes nothing for me to just become lost.
Mm-hmm.
And the way I would describe it to other people is like, it would feel like we're living in the same place, but we're in different times. Like
Yeah.
my time runs, if hers is 60 seconds a minute, mine feels like it's 90 seconds a minute. Like I
Mm-hmm.
need more time to be able to think and to understand and to listen to what's being said, and then take it in and go, okay, here's my response that's going to be satisfactory to you to understand what I'm trying to say. And I
Mm-hmm.
feel under so much pressure that I to try and keep up and not
Yeah.
fall behind, that like you, and the same, like you just said, I end up making no sense, or I freeze up, and then I'm looking like I'm being difficult. Like
Mm-hmm.
I give the impression that I'm intentionally being difficult, or that I'm being a jerk,
Or that you don't
or
want to have the conversation, or
yeah,
you don't want to deal with it. And I guess the best thing, what comes to mind every time is when Russell Barkley talks about inattentive ADHD, and I think he says delayed cognitive tempo.
yeah,
And it's like where we can process everything just the same as everybody else. It just takes us a little bit longer. And I
yeah,
feel like that is pretty
that's right.
accurate. I mean, there are some
Absolutely.
situations, there are some high stress crisis situations where I'm like, okay, we need to do blah, 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 blah. But then when it comes to having those difficult conversations, and I'm so focused on one or two things, like trying not to interrupt and trying to just listen and take in, that I feel like I can definitely feel that things are processing slower than they do in the
Yeah,
normal day.
yeah, yeah. No kidding. Yeah.
And it's
I
so
have this,
frustrating.
I know it is super frustrating. I've, I didn't even know this until late that my, I would just come off of being stressed out and overwhelmed, and I would I take a break and just kind of chill out
Mm-hmm.
and think. And I would, and in my brain, I would like, okay, I've got my explanation, or I know what to say. So I'd come out and I'd
Mm-hmm.
say it, but I wouldn't know until the moment, like, and I mean, like, after I've said it,
Mm-hmm.
and it could be anywhere from a minute to 5 minutes, or that there's more, that I had more,
Mm-hmm.
but I didn't know that I had more. I thought I had it all right then,
Yeah.
and then I didn't notice, and then it happened a third time. I finished thinking I'm done, and then she's talking, and my brain is thinking and thinking and thinking and thinking, and all of a sudden, it's like the next chapter opened, and it floods in, goes, oh, here, there's more for you to say. This is
Mm-hmm.
going to help explain it. And all of a sudden I'm going, oh wait, I've got more to say.
Mm-hmm.
And it made sense, and she finally, it would make her feel better, or it would make sense. But then she was getting mad, going, oh my God, you keep doing this where you think you've got it all, and then it's incomplete. But then you realize later that you've got more. Why can't you just get it all at once? And I'm like, but that's the problem, is that I think I do.
Mm-hmm.
I think I've got it all at once. I don't know that I don't until later. I
Yeah.
I could do whatever I can do all the thoughts and all the work and all the writing down I can that I want. But
You need a
if
trigger.
my,
It's almost like you need a
yeah,
trigger.
exactly.
And
Exactly. And yeah.
having the time is kind of like that trigger. It's like it's like something clicks and it's like, oh, there we go. Okay.
Yeah. It's
And
like, it's just like they say ADHD people do well in situations where there's a deadline, or where they realize they've only got
mm-hmm.
so much time. It's the same sort of thing. Like,
Yeah.
if I feel like I've got all the time in the world, my brain relaxes, and I think I've got enough. But if I'm under crisis or I'm under pressure, it's like my brain suddenly just it kicks into, it's like a hyper mode, or
Yeah.
it has
It
this
gets into that,
extra.
you get into that like hyper focus,
Yeah.
which I kind of need because like what happens with me, especially at work. At work
Yeah.
is like the biggest example. My boss will ask me to pull these reports together to present. And the longer I have to do it, the longer I overthink it. And the more difficult I make it and the more complex I make it. And then once it comes down to deadline time and I'm like, oh crap, I have all this data and I haven't had a chance to analyze it the way I want to. And then, I had this meeting. It was like I had 2 hours to get it all done before the meeting. And then all of a sudden, it was just like, snap.
Yeah.
Something clicked into place and I had it done in an hour and a half. And it was like
Yeah.
complete clarity. But I'd had
Mm-hmm.
over a week and a half to do it, and I did all of this data gathering, and I was doing all of this analyzing, but none of it was working out right. But then the moment that deadline came and I hadn't had it, it was just like, it was my aha moment. It was like, you know what? I can
Yeah.
do this and this and this, and that's exactly what they want. And it was done in, I mean, I can't even tell you how many hours I would have spent on it without that. Because
Right.
I overthought it. I went into overanalyze mode.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's a common. Yeah,
And then
I
there's
have that
been,
too.
probably my biggest example of waiting until the last minute. I was getting my master's degree and I was doing this paper on pharmaceutical ethics. And I did all my research and it was the day it was due. It was a 13-page double-spaced paper.
Wow.
I did a 13-page paper, submitted it. Something happened and the file didn't work.
Uh-oh.
Found out I had erased it by accident.
Oh no.
Had to do it all over again. The teacher gave me until, I think she gave me until the next afternoon to get it in. I completely rewrote it, submitted it, And she wrote me back and she said, "Did you realize this was supposed to be double spaced?" And I was like, "Yeah." I wrote a 26-page paper in less than 24 hours because it was single spaced. I didn't check my spacing.
Oh my God.
But it was like,
Wow.
I wrote this whole paper in a day because I was up on that deadline where I'd had the whole semester to do
Wow.
it,
Wow.
you know?
Yeah. Holy smokes.
Mm-hmm. It's probably one of
Gee.
my proudest moments as an ADHDer because I'm
Yeah.
like, holy shit, look what I did. And I got an A on that paper. I was so proud of it.
Nice. That's amazing. Wow. That's incredible. Yeah, that's good. I know that's the thing is we seem to do well in the crunch, but yet
Mm-hmm.
it it's like I think to myself, if I stay relaxed, I'm not going to do well. But at the same time, the stress levels, if I have, it's okay. I don't know exactly how or why this is for myself, but if I'm by myself, if it's just
Mm-hmm.
me and there's a situation that is potentially stressful, or I'll go even as far as dangerous or potentially like financially bad, like
Mm-hmm.
flooding or something, for example, I I'm really good under pressure, and I seem to be able to know what to do in the moment,
Mm-hmm.
do it quick, think,
Yep.
act, no problem.
Mm-hmm.
And I had that happen to me not long, like a couple years ago, and I managed to just everything went smoothly because I was able to react and respond
Mm-hmm.
appropriately and quickly. But with somebody else there, it's different.
Yeah.
I can do it by myself, but all of a sudden, as soon as there's another person who's watching, and like, I can't do it. It's
Yeah.
almost like I forget, or I'm too scared if I can
Yep.
make a mistake.
Yep.
And it all floods in, and next thing you know, they're taking over, or they're getting upset because it's, why is it
Or
taking so
because
long?
you
You,
have
you
too
know?
many options or you're not making the right decision or
Yes.
yeah, exactly. It's like having
Yeah.
that other person to consider just completely fries your brain for some
Yeah.
reason.
Yeah. And it's happened so many times that there's a false impression that I wasn't capable of doing
Yeah.
these things. And yet I've
Mhm.
said to myself, and I've tried, I didn't say it to her because I had that feeling that if I were to say these things, that the fight would get big. But
Mhm.
I remember in my mind saying, you're so wrong, because I can do these things.
Yeah.
I've done this many, many, many times. This isn't something that's new to me.
Mhm.
It's just for whatever reason with
When
you
it involves
there.
another person.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
I know. And it's a no-win situation, it feels
It's so
like.
frustrating.
It
Oh, cuz it's like
is.
if I didn't worry about what that other person thought about my choices,
Yeah.
I would be done with this already. I would have already done it. I would have already made the choice.
Yeah. Exactly.
But there's like a people pleasing element, I think, when you have ADHD because it goes back to trauma
Yeah.
and being undiagnosed and being in school and not performing, not living up to your potential and not doing what you're supposed to be doing or not getting your homework turned in or not doing this or not doing that or doing this wrong and I can't believe you did that, you know better, you're smarter than this. Hearing all of those things, it's like it kind of reverts you back to that when
Yeah.
you have to make decisions that involve other people because you don't want to feel like that again. You don't want that shame, you don't want that feeling.
Exactly.
But when you're just
Yeah.
doing it for you, it's like boom, done.
Yeah. Absolutely.
'Cause you're
Now
the only one
that
that has to
that's
deal
yeah,
with any fallout or consequences.
absolutely, exactly. Yes, and that's to me that was always easy because it was just
Mhm.
me that I didn't have anyone else to think about or to worry about the potential effects or damages, right? It
Yep.
was just me. And I it's that's and along another angle is this is the the motivation when I was with when you're with someone, if especially if it's on a daily basis and it's all the and it's all
Mhm.
the time regular, it's just the motivation with because of that fear of failure of
Mhm.
that rejection RSD, it it would basically drive the motivation level so low
Mhm.
is that I wouldn't even think necessarily, do I want to do this? Is either I would force myself to do it because I had to,
Yeah,
or I'd push it off, right? Going, yeah,
and hope it
well,
goes away.
yeah. And now exactly. And now the fact that it's like back to one person,
Mhm.
it's like, okay, no big deal. I go out, I make dinner, I clean up, it's done. I don't have to
Mhm.
think about it. There is no delay. There is no, oh, should I do it now or should I wait? It's just do it. It's good. It's
Mhm.
done. It's, you're taking care of it. And because the in the back of my mind, it's like, I've got it done now. I don't have to come out before bed and go, oh crap, now I've got to do this up and clean this up. It's all done. I've got more free time. I have more,
Mhm.
I can do stuff that I want to do. I don't have to think about all these other little things that get in the way. And then all that piling on is that anxiety that
Mhm.
like you're feeling anxious because you're going, oh my god, I'm doing it again, I'm forgetting to clean now, like there's
Yep.
potential that I'm gonna get yelled at or I'm gonna be scolded because I didn't do this right or I didn't do it. And so there's all these little factors that are
Mhm.
working into that.
Yeah, exactly. Right on
Yeah.
point. Yeah, and
Yeah,
it's
and you would, and the thing that you would think about is, you would think that all would be do the opposite.
Mhm.
That it would say it would get you to do it, or to do it better, or to be on top of it. But it does the opposite.
Yeah,
And
it's almost
that's
like your brain resisting it.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, because there's that fear, right?
Yep.
Like, what's more important, taking care of yourself and not doing it because you're afraid, or overriding that and doing it anyways because it's maybe you'll make an impression, or maybe or but then at the
Mhm.
same time you're going, well, maybe I'm going to mess up.
Yep.
And yeah, it's so complicated. And
It's like, why can't things just be easy?
exactly.
And I used to remember growing up, just it always felt like everybody had things so much easier. Like the kids at school, they could study.
Yeah.
It's like, and I was always like, how can you just sit there and study? I can't do that. It was so hard. Like so many things in
Yeah.
school, especially, were just so hard. And even, still now, it's like being a mom and then seeing all these moms do all of these things. And it's just kind of like, how are you doing that? Like, I can't even fathom doing half of that. It exhausts me to think about it.
Yeah.
And it's just so frustrating. And then you see, I guess I see all these, I just, I don't know. I just always felt like things were so much harder. And then once I got the diagnosis, it's like it finally made sense that, okay, I'm not just broken, I'm just different.
Yeah.
And there are other people that have it that struggle too. It's like there are other people that have a hard time remembering to do the dishes or can't sit down and study for hours on end to pass a test or that can be Pinterest moms. It's just like, but that's
Yeah.
okay. And coming to terms with
Absolutely.
that
Yeah.
being okay is like huge. But then
Yeah.
we still struggle with things like this because all of that is always there.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a link to everything when when you look at it
Mm-hmm.
from afar, right? The ADHD is the root of everything, like
Yeah.
for those who it is like it's legitimately ADHD is the root. And then you look at things like rejections like RSD,
Mm-hmm.
and you look at stress and trauma and high anxiety levels, and you can put them all together, you can match them up, and you see where it comes from, because a person with ADHD who is not diagnosed and thinks, what the hell is wrong with me? Why is this happening?
It's like
And then
ADHD is like the catalyst for all of these other things.
yeah, yeah. And exactly. So you got one or two other people constantly on you and saying, why can't you do this? Why are you
Mm-hmm.
always messing up? Why do you always make mistakes? Why can't you be like your brother? Or why can't,
Oh
like, and
God.
next thing you know, you're going, yeah, and then but in
Mm-hmm.
no time you're suddenly developing this fear of rejection, and it not only is it extreme anxiety, creates so much anxiety and stress. It gets to the point where you would rather not do anything
Like make
to
the phone
avoid it.
calls.
Yeah,
That's like
yeah,
one of the things I think a lot of us struggle with is doing simple tasks like making phone
yeah,
calls or sending emails. And I think a lot of that stems from that history of always messing things up and not wanting to deal with it.
yeah.
And even though it seems simple, I don't know if you know who Brendan Mahan is, but he has this whole thing. He does oh, what is his podcast called? I can't remember what it's called, but ADHD Essentials, that's what it is.
Ah,
But he
okay.
talks about the wall of shame and how we build this wall of shame brick by brick through our lives based on our experiences that we have with our ADHD. And by the time we're adults, we've built this wall. And every time we have to do a task, it's like we have to go through the wall. So you have choices. You can go through it, you
Mm,
can go over it. But until you deal with everything and you deal with all of that shame and all of those other things, all of those tasks are going to always be hard. And they're because they're
yeah.
going to be tied to all of that, those years of bad experiences
Mm-hmm.
until you can deal with it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's amazing how when you can see it, and you can understand, and you can take that step back and look at it.
Mm-hmm.
It you start to finally really see and understand it,
I
because
think that
it
is one of
takes a
the
hard
things.
time. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's like I know I'm sure you've probably experienced the same as I did, that once I got diagnosed, then I started researching it and actually learning about what ADHD was, because my idea of it was completely skewed and stereotypical of that little boy in the classroom that couldn't sit still, because that's what I
Yeah.
was always told. But once I started reading and started researching, I had no idea what executive functions were. Never heard of it
Yeah.
before. And then I started deep diving into all of these things and learning about them. It was like this awakening. And then you
Yeah.
can step back and kind of reevaluate your entire life and how all of those symptoms and all of those things played out. And you can see it. It's like, okay, this is where I can see where my executive functions weren't working for me in school. This is why I struggled. It's why it took me 10 years to get my bachelor's degree. It's why I switched majors 5 times.
Right.
It's why I went part-time and could never do full-time. And all of these things just started to make so much more sense. But until you
Yeah.
start to understand it more, I think you just struggle so much more with it. And I don't know.
Yeah. Absolutely. Everybody's story is slightly different into
Mhm.
in some ways, yeah, but it's the same kind of storyline, you know, like
Yeah.
or step by step. Like I know I looked when I started to understand and I got diagnosed and it confirmed what I felt. It I kept yeah, I definitely did the research and I also
Mm-hmm.
kept looking back at my past and trying to remember situations that happened in my life and then sitting down and going, okay, this is why, like, you know, this explains it. This is why I had such a hard time with friends,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like maintaining friendships. And then this
Yep.
is why I had such a hard time being even willing to try and date somebody
Mm-hmm.
or having the courage to partake in extracurricular curricular activities. Or it's because my lack of abilities to regulate my emotions and
Yep.
to think and then hyper focusing and like I still do it, even though in conversations with people where I get so stuck and so into something or like if I'm talking about myself that even when the person attempts to kind of change the subject
Mm-hmm.
or talk about themselves, I hear it, but I'm not doing anything or I'm not acknowledging or I'm not going, hey, it's time to kind of take a break or let them talk or
Mm-hmm.
anything. You just you get so into it.
Yeah.
And next thing you know, the person's looking at you going, are you ever going to shut up? Right? Or
Yeah.
like,
And
why are
then we
you
don't
talking
always
so
pick up on
much?
those cues. And then
No,
later we're like,
exactly.
oh God, did I overshare? Do they hate
Yeah.
me now?
Yeah. I don't know how many times I had a first meeting with somebody, like a woman or, you know, a potential date and talk. And when they would say something, instead of going, oh, right. Okay. And then maybe asking a follow-up question, it would be like, oh yeah. And then going right back into it and then thinking, oh, that went great, and
Yep.
then the next day it's like, oh, we don't have any chemistry. It just like they wouldn't tell the truth. They would just try
Yeah.
to, you know, make up a nice way of saying it. And I until I finally understood, I couldn't figure, you know, I could never figure out why was I always having so many problems. Why could it, you know, I would always think it was working, but the other person never agreed and I never got anywhere. And suddenly now it would make sense. It's
Yeah.
just you get so hyper focused and you're trying to talk and you're trying to listen, but I can't do both
Mm-hmm.
because the second I stop talking, if I don't think about what I want to say, I'm gonna listen. Sure, I can listen really great,
Yeah.
but I can't separate my thoughts from trying to remember or to listen. It's and that was
Mm-hmm.
just a bad sign of ADHD, and I had no idea. I just thought I like to talk.
Yep. Yeah.
You
I
don't
mean,
know
when you
these
were talking
things.
about having a hard time regulating your emotions growing up, like
Yeah.
there are times that I remember being with family and we played pinochle. My family is big pinochle players.
Mm.
But I had one experience where I guess I had a really good hand, but I thought it was a bad hand. And then so they were making fun of me because I thought it was a bad hand and said that we had to quit the game and start
Ah.
over. But I had the best hand that anybody had. I have not played a game of pinochle since
Wow.
because my emotions got so crazy and I couldn't control them. And then that stuck with me, that shame from playing. I've never been able to play again
That's yeah. I can totally see
because it was like
how that
it was
would
my whole
happen.
family there. And so
Yeah.
when everybody's laughing and then you're mortified, it multiplies it. And I remember running off and just crying because I
Hmm.
was so ashamed
That's
and so
terrible.
embarrassed.
Wow.
And they still talk about it.
Yeah.
And so I still don't play.
Ugh, I know. I can see how that. Yeah, I get that. I think I had an opposite issue. um, I because of my lack of emotional regulation, I can't. I have a hard time enjoying it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like I get too into, like, if especially if we're playing a game, it doesn't, and if it, even if it's a four people,
Yeah.
everybody, right? I Instead of enjoying it and having a good time and laughing and whatever, I would. It's like I was so focused on what was happening.
Yeah.
Sure, I would do great. I was really good, right? Like I think the best examples were playing charades, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
everybody doing your thing. And I was always so good at figuring out what was being done and or the actions, and I could always guess, and our teams would always win, and they're always like, "Oh my god, how are you getting these?" And yet I would never. It's like all the other stuff,
Mm-hmm.
all that extracurricular activity, and the chattiness and the there's a word for it, the social aspect. It's like I was not avoiding it, but I was missing out on it completely because
Yeah.
I was so focused on the concept of, or the, what I'm doing,
Mm-hmm.
that I could not do
You
the
couldn't
other
actually
aspects.
enjoy being with everybody. You were so
Yeah.
focused on what you were doing, you couldn't have fun and enjoy everybody's company.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I think that was happening with everything. I'd go bowling and my focus would be so much on the bowling that I would, it'd be almost like I would be sitting there just kind of maybe saying a few words, but there'd be no
Mm-hmm.
talking. There very little interaction with anybody. And all I
Yeah.
would think about is, how am I going to throw the ball the next round or to get a better score?
Yeah.
It's just there's, and that was because I couldn't regulate, and I couldn't, and it was, it's like I was so hyper focused
Mm-hmm.
on the analytical, the logic part of it, that
Right.
I had no social skill, I had no social ability, and then there was a lot of it was fear part, like being afraid of messing it up or saying something wrong. So it was almost like a hiding behind the activity, and
Yeah.
but you don't know, you don't I didn't have a clue what was going on.
Yeah. It's so strange how that works. Like until somebody tells you,
Yeah.
okay, this is what you have, this is what's going on,
Yeah.
you don't realize all of those quirks. Like, there's something. At least for me, I always knew something was different. I always felt different. Like you were talking about, like fitting with friends, not having very many friends. I was always jealous of
Yeah.
friend groups of like 4 or 5 people. I would always have 1 or 2 friends, but then they would have
I
other friends, and then I would be jealous of their relationships with their other friends. Or the fact that, if we were in a group, I never felt like I fit in that group. Even when, they would talk to me and include me, I just never felt like I fit in. And it was a lot of
mm-hmm.
that and all of the other things. And then having that diagnosis just made everything make sense and click. And it makes you see
Yeah.
your life in a different way.
Oh, for sure.
But I think the one thing you have to be careful of, at least for me, was the woulda, coulda, shoulda beens.
Yeah.
What if I had been
Yeah.
diagnosed earlier? What if my parents had gotten me help? What if my teachers had said anything? I could have gone to school and gotten that law degree I wanted. I could have become that marine biologist. I could have finished school earlier. I could have done better in high school.
Yeah.
You know, all of these
Mm-hmm.
things. And if you get stuck in that, can be really damaging, because that
Yeah.
depression can kick in hard. And it hit me hard. It hit me hard for a while.
Yeah.
It took me a while to, because I was mad. I think I went through the whole cycle of grief after I was diagnosed. The
Oh, wow.
denial, it took me 3 doctors to finally say, "Okay, yes, this is what it is." And I was mad. I was mad at my teachers. I was mad at my doctors. I was mad at my parents. I was mad at
Mm-hmm.
everybody. I was mad at my psychiatrist that didn't catch on to it. I was so mad for so long. And then finally, after I was mad, I was sad, and then I accepted everything. And it's made things so much easier just to accept and move on and kind of try and focus on the future. But I feel like that is something that can be very dangerous if you're not careful.
Right. It makes sense. Absolutely. Because that's all you think about.
Mhm.
And and you can't change it. And that's
No.
the part that makes you angry is that you want to change it. You wish you could, but you can't do anything about it.
Yep.
But you don't want to accept that.
Mhm.
Like, yeah. Yeah.
It's like, if only they had done this, this wouldn't have been so hard. And
Mm-hmm.
then even still, sometimes I get jealous of people. I'll see people on TikTok that, have been diagnosed and how they're doing so great with X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, I hate you.
Mm.
Happy for you, but I hate you at the same time because that's not how it went for me. I
Yeah.
wish it had, but it's not how it went. And it's just people, I don't know. I feel like people who were diagnosed early, who had people that were there for them, that knew that paid attention and watched out for them, don't realize how lucky they were.
Mm-hmm. No kidding.
They don't realize how lucky they were.
Yeah. I know. I agree. It, yeah, oh, I could probably fill hours with examples.
Yeah.
Just thinking of and having another one come up and go, oh, right. Yes. Now
Mhm.
this one. And,
Yep.
like it, I, I think my biggest issue for the longest time was just thinking about like seeing something on TV or hearing like observing a
Mhm.
couple having a nice moment, and my first thoughts are it would never fail. It was always, I wish I could have that
Mhm.
nice moment.
Yeah.
And yet it would kind of make me jealous, and it would make me upset because it would immediately go back to me going, why do I have this? Why can't I get rid of this? This is holding me back because I can't do these things. I can't
Mhm.
think that way. I can't act that way. And it drives me crazy
Mhm.
because I see something that almost feels I'm not allowed to have that
Yeah.
because of what is holding, like what I have, what is holding me back.
Yep.
And it, I don't know some days what to think. And
Yeah. Sometimes
yeah,
I'll see people make light of it and joke about it. And on the one hand, I'm like, yeah, it's good that you can do that because it can be so heavy. But at the same time, I'm like, that's kind of dangerous because ADHD and Ed Hallowell talks about how dangerous it is, especially when you have, and so does Dr. Barkley, especially
mm,
inattentive. I mean, it can be life changing and not in a good way.
yeah,
You think about all
yeah,
of the people, car accidents.
yeah. That's a big one. That is huge when it comes to people with
I mean,
ADHD.
if fires, accidental fires, I mean,
Yeah,
there are just so many instances where ADHD can be life shattering, and people don't
yeah,
think about that. They just think about, oh, take your medicine, you'll be fine. But that's not all it is. It's not all about the focus. it's not just about that one aspect. And I think there's a lot of misinformation. And I think that's like
Yeah.
things like emotional regulation and RSD don't get considered a lot until recently. I think is maybe within maybe the last 5 years, it's really become more prominent. And it's not even in the DSMV
Ugh, I
as an
know.
actual symptom,
Yeah.
which is frustrating because I feel like it's probably one of the largest components
Yeah, and Barkley talks about that.
all the time. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's crazy because they all look at these at the classic symptoms, the ones that they thought
Hmm.
of back in the day when it was first become, first started.
Right.
Is they always think about, oh, he can't focus, he always forgets, he can't sit still, they run around and they're always doing like
Hmm.
weird things that everybody else goes, what was that about?
Yeah.
But they never think about the other aspects of it, about the emotional side and like the struggles with, yeah, with emotions and with functions and
Yeah. I
making
mean, you've
choices.
time management, short term
Yeah.
memory. You know how many times I've made a list and taken it to the grocery store and had the list in front of me and marked things off, but still did not get everything on my list? Or
Ugh,
went in with just 3 things and couldn't remember all 3 of them? Or went, got 50 things and none of them were what were on my list?
right.
I mean,
Yeah.
the it's just it affects so many different aspects. But the fact that the probably the largest one of the even I'd say even debilitating is the emotional side of it. And the fact that the
Yeah.
emotions, especially in puberty, become so erratic, I that's when the symptoms usually are at their highest. It gets brushed off
Mm-hmm.
as puberty. Or, oh, they're just
Yes.
going through adolescence instead of, wait a second, maybe these things from before, this is what's really going on, and we're just now really seeing it. Because my grades and stuff didn't start to suffer until right around then.
Right.
And that's when I started having all of my problems, was like between 5th and 8th grade.
Mm-hmm.
That's when everything
Jeez.
really kicked up for me.
Wow. I know that's tough. It's you can there are certain things that you can definitely pinpoint
Mhm.
and say this is when I first started it, or when I first noticed. Like, I had a conversation with my therapist. I think it was probably a week or two after we talked, and I was I it hadn't really come up before, and it was all to do with emotions.
Mhm.
And the reason it came up is because there was this discussion that the two of us, my girlfriend and I, had about um, the lack, like, to do with emotional regulation and the
Mhm.
lack of having any ability to express it or to feel it. And I remember saying to myself, like, I can't remember exactly how we got to it, like to the specific area, but he asked me a question as to what age do you remember things starting to change, like where you were feeling like you could express your emotions and you had fun and you felt good and you could feel sadness and anger and excitement, and it was obvious to then all of a sudden it started to go away, or it felt like you couldn't do it, or it was too
Mhm.
much of an effort, or you keep feeling like you think you're being excited or you think you're being calm and someone's thinking you're being angry, or you're having a tone,
Yeah.
and you're going, what? I don't, that can't be.
Or
Like,
getting so mad that you cry
yeah.
for no reason. It's like I would get so angry and so mad that I would just cry
Mm,
uncontrollably, and it would turn into these hysterics that I couldn't stop. Like, I would be like, "I'm good, but I can't stop all of this that's pouring out of me. It won't stop."
right.
And then there would be other times where I would just be numb and had no emotion about it at all. And I mean, that's it. You're not in control of it.
Yeah.
So then you don't know how your reactions are going to be, because you're not having normal reactions. They're either way up here or way down here. You're never really kind of like normal up and down fluctuations. You're way extreme.
Yeah. Absolutely. That is definitely a sign of it. Like, or one of the symptoms, I should say,
Yeah.
is that extreme on either end. Yeah. The one thing I wasn't sure about was every time any sort of situation in daily life or in a major situation would occur, whether it was like disaster or like something really bad happening or really, really good, or something that was super sad, my instinct, rather than allow myself to feel it and to, to take it in and understand or know that that's a really sad, unfortunate problem or situation or thing that happened, my automatic response or go-to was to think about it and analyze it.
Yeah.
And to kind of ponder and come up with explanations or reasonings or this is why, rather than just, okay, it's happened.
Yeah.
Let's deal with it. And it was always the case. And so something really like the potential of the relationship ending, or seeing her crying and being upset, and instead of responding with emotion or empathy, it would be me trying to analyze the situation. Why I did this? Why did I do it? Why can't I not stop? Or and it was like I could never just be there, like never let it be. And it was always thinking, always. And it was its way of like dissociating, I guess you could say, instead of facing it.
But that dissociation is more of like a trauma response, though.
Yeah.
Big
So
time. I mean, I've done
there's
that
your
a
mix.
lot.
Yeah.
I've got a lot. Yeah, that's a lot that your overlap. And
Yeah.
I do a lot of dissociation too, especially when I look back on things that happened when I was younger, and then if I get into too much of an emotional situation, I think that's where a lot of the numbness comes in, is that dissociation. If it's too much, then I just shut down and the
Makes
emotions
sense.
go off.
Yes. Yeah. I know that. That's a
And
common
like
thing with me
feeling
too.
like I'm outside of myself, looking at the situation from outside. It's odd, but at the same time, I've done it for so long, it just feels normal.
Exactly. It's all the time, every single time. You don't even think about it. You don't go, how should I respond? It's just, it happens.
It just happens, and
yeah.
you're there, and then all of a sudden you're there, but you're not.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's that coping mechanism.
Yeah. It just, the thing that I'm getting from everything that we've talked about so far, I'm seeing how I can see how they can't fix it, like they can't, they can help. They can, there's medication, there's different techniques that you can use to help yourself. And then dealing with, if the trauma is involved, there's dealing with the trauma. But I can see from a psychiatrist or a psychologist point of view, or an expert, how there's just the threads that come out of it, like
Yeah.
all the
It's
going
like a
this
very
way. Yeah.
intricate spider web,
Yeah.
is how I
Exactly.
kind of think about it. And especially when you have a complex diagnosis like you do, like I do,
Yeah.
and then you have the trauma in there, it's almost like you can't really deal with anything else until you deal with the trauma.
Yeah.
It's like the trauma is like the apex, and everything else
Yeah.
just kind of is around it. But I think until the trauma is dealt with, the rest of it is going to be harder. You can try and deal with anxiety, but if you don't deal with the trauma, the anxiety is going to come back, or the depression is going to
Exactly.
come back.
Yes.
And you can deal with the ADHD, but the trauma is going to up your symptoms, regardless
Yeah.
if you're on medication or if you're not. And then things like your short-term memory and being distracted, your ADHD symptoms also prevent you from taking your medication all the time like you're supposed to, like a good little normal person, which drives me insane. It's like, why do they only give you a 30-day supply of your medication
Yeah.
when you can't even remember to take it on a daily basis? But anyway, that's something else. But
Yeah. Oh.
and then that pulls into it, and it's just it's complex, and that's the only way you can really describe it, is it's just this complex interwoven spider web that you pull on one string and the rest of them shake too.
Yeah. That's a good way of putting it. Absolutely. Yeah.
They just
I
all,
know.
yeah.
Yeah. Like it.
It's
See,
not a one
there's
pill
things. Yeah.
size fits
No.
all. It's not a one solution for
Nope.
everything. It's a, you need to eat the right foods for your brain. You need to exercise for your dopamine. You need to take your meds to help with your
Yeah.
reuptake. You need to do your uh, meditation that you can't do because you can't quiet your brain, but you need to do it because it'll quiet your brain. you know,
Yeah.
it's a combination, and it's not ever going to be a one thing is a magic cure all. And the one thing about ADHD is you're going to have to constantly change your plan because you're going to get bored with it and you're going to stop doing it,
Yeah.
because that's what we do. We get bored with
Yeah.
things and then they
Yeah.
don't work.
100%.
Like
I agree.
I had everything figured out. And for 2 years, I was in the best shape of my life. I was the best organized I'd ever been. And then COVID hits and everything goes to crap. And now it's like, I can't get back there because none of those things that worked before are working again. I have to find different things to do, different tools. And it's a
Yeah.
constant struggle.
Absolutely. Yeah. And yeah, it is. It is. So one last thing here before
Hmm.
I end this show. It's kind of a question, and I want your opinion and a thought on this. Of the people, especially more today, so more so today because of the understanding of mental health compared to 20 years ago. Of the people who are diagnosed with ADHD, how many of them do you think at the same time are dealing with trauma? And I don't mean like a single event. I'm talking like repetitive trauma from their childhood friends or their classmates or their parents or their
I would
siblings.
say if they're undiagnosed until later in life and not diagnosed when they're younger, still in school, still able to fix that,
Yeah.
I mean, I would say close to 100% of us have some
Mm,
kind of trauma from that. I mean, not everybody's going to have the same level of it,
yeah.
but there's like 30% of the population that are incarcerated right now that have undiagnosed mental health illnesses,
Mm-hmm.
ADHD. Think about how many people self-medicate
Yeah.
with heroin, with cocaine, with so many,
Alcohol.
alcohol, all of these
Yeah.
things because they're undiagnosed and they don't know how to get help. They don't know what's wrong with them. And it's depression and anxiety and trauma and ADHD, and that's how they deal with it. And
Yeah.
all of those self-medication strategies, they get there because of trauma, because of shame, because of fear of failure,
Yeah.
because they feel unworthy or unloved or not good enough, or
Yeah.
because that's how they've been made to feel. They're outcasts. They don't fit in
Mm-hmm.
anywhere. They, I mean, just with my own experience, I always felt like an outcast. No matter how I
Right.
belonged with people or how I fit in with people, I just always felt other or outside. Like I knew something was
Right.
different, but I didn't know what.
Yeah.
And constantly being told things like, I know you're better than this. This isn't you. Look, why can't you be more like your brother, more like your sister? Why can't you do this? Why aren't you living up to your potential? Why did you do this? We don't know why we do the things that we do half of the freaking time
Yeah.
because we have no damn impulse control. And
Mm-hmm.
then you just have this immense amount of shame. And again, back to this, the wall of shame that you build up. And I would
Yeah.
venture that there is probably not one person that's diagnosed later in life that doesn't have some kind of trauma from that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I wish I could remember my earlier years clearer. Like
Mhm.
I have vague memories of it, but I really
Yeah.
wish I could, because I could narrow down a lot more, because I I deal with trauma today, and I deal with like fear of rejection and fear of um like I'm always freezing up, and I'm always
Mhm.
fawning with people because I want to please them, and I want to make them happy, to avoid
Mhm.
having them add or angry at me or hate me
Yep.
or not want to deal with me. But then I look back, and a lot of it, I'm not saying all, but a lot of it originates from the way I was. Like
Yeah.
behaviors, my behaviors, my
Mhm.
inability to regulate, or like stubbornness, like
Yeah.
all sorts of little things that were playing in when I was a really young kid, that
Oh, yeah, my
causes.
impulsivity got
Yeah,
me in so much trouble, and if that was one of the primary symptoms of ADHD, somebody and that was well known back then, somebody would have tagged me for sure,
absolutely.
because that's where all my trouble came in. But like you, the memories that I do have of childhood are primarily of the trauma.
Mm-hmm.
I don't
Yeah,
remember all of the good times that I had. I have very spotty memories except for the big trauma events for me,
right.
where kids chased after me after school and threw a board in my back or hit me with a tobacco stick right behind
Oh,
my house. And I remember the police coming, and I remember being in a fight with girls after school right at the bus where the buses were, and never fitting in with people and not understanding why they didn't like me, you know? And
right.
then the event, like, sitting at the table trying to do math with my dad. So many of us I know have that, whether you have ADHD or not, that homework trauma, that math homework trauma, but and
Mm-hmm.
it's the one thing that always you're not living up to your potential. I know you're better than this. You can do better than this. And it was always, I'm trying, but it was never good enough. And so those are the things that stick out to me. I have very few good memories about achievements in school. And the only,
Yeah,
like, I
same.
have in ninth grade, I had the highest GPA in science.
Nice.
But I only remember that because I have the physical medal and the
Yeah.
certificate. I don't
Yeah.
actually remember getting it or being told that I was getting it or my parents' reaction. I don't remember any of that. And the only reason I have a memory of that, it's not even really a memory. It's just a fact from a piece of paper and physical things that I have.
Right. Jeez. I understand, because that's a lot like the way it is for me. If I think about a certain year or a certain situation in school, it's the first thing that always pops up is a negative memory.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you think about the person that always teased you, or or that you could never get along with,
Mm-hmm.
or you think about a teacher, and your first thought is the teacher looking at you with this look of, oh my God, why does he act this way? Why can't he just,
Mm-hmm.
like, listen more? Or why does he always have to talk about something? Like, it's never, oh, that teacher thought you were a great kid with, a nice personality, with it was always helpful and always had fun. No, it was always the negative part of it
Yep.
that always comes up. And so you're reinforcing to yourself that your experiences were the negative ones. I literally have to either have something spark, like you said, like
Mm-hmm.
your metal is what helps you to remember that. I either see pictures of
Yep.
good times, or something suddenly sparks a memory of a good
Mm-hmm.
event, and I feel good about it. But remembering the details and everything about it is so much harder
Yeah.
than if somebody says, "Oh, remember when you got in trouble and you had to go to the
It's
office
like,
and this
yeah, I
happened,"
remember
and it's
what
like,
I was
yeah,
wearing and where I was at, and
yeah,
that
yeah,
a light
I
bulb was
have,
out in the ceiling. And
yeah,
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 I went on a girls' trip with my family, my cousin and my aunt and my sister back in April. And my aunt was she's only 4 years older than me. So we were all kind of relatively with the same age.
mm-hmm,
And she was asking me if I remembered this story from when I was younger. And she recalled all of these details and nothing,
mm,
nothing. But my aunt, my sister remembered, my cousin remembered, nothing. I had nothing. They were all
wow,
looking at me like, "Oh my God, I can't believe you don't remember that." There's a lot I don't remember. There's a
yeah,
lot that I don't remember. But then I'll remember random crap. Like the name of this actor in this movie who's married to so and so in this other movie. And it's so crazy.
yeah, jeez, that's, yeah, that, I know, it's interesting. It's almost wish you could study that. Like,
Mhm.
I'm sure somebody is somewhere.
Probably.
Wow. Yeah. I hope in the future, whether it's through technology or just a better understanding, or like, I don't know, somehow, that mental health and the understanding of how the brain functions
Mhm.
is going to be better understood, and the acceptance in
Yeah.
general. Like, it's we're so far away. You think there's been a lot of progress made, and yet when you really think about it, it's probably 10, maybe 20% of
Yeah.
what's capable still.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I think the one thing that I wish more than anything was that there was some kind of screening process for kids in
Yeah.
school, an accurate screening process for kids in school to be able to catch these things when they're young.
Yeah.
So they don't have to have that trauma, those experiences, all of those things that we had to go through. Nobody should have to be that resilient.
No.
You shouldn't have to be that resilient. You shouldn't have to go through that much struggle.
Absolutely not.
And then to
Well,
have
yeah.
resources to help them.
Absolutely. I think the one good thing about today and even the next 5 to 10 years is with more people having a diagnosis in one form or another, they're going to have children and they're going to have a different view of this. So instead of it being like with my dad or with my father's dad, the way that they felt and the way that they believed things were and how they responded, like hopefully the generation after me, because I'm already screwed. But like when you think about it, like the kids, my youngest siblings or sorry, cousins who are now just starting to become adults and have parents that are doing it the right way instead of not listening to them and not acknowledging their emotions and their fears and their concerns. They are doing the things that are required. And that child has a much better chance of growing up with a healthy lifestyle and has a better chance of dealing with situations like being in school and having one of their classmates is different, like whether it's physically or mentally. And instead of them being teased and being made fun of and being thought of as different, there's the understanding of, hey, this is the reason, and the teachers and everybody understands, and they're accepted, and they're not looked at as different or treated in a different way because we got to treat this person so that they don't feel under like left out. It's just acceptance, but it's taking an older I hate to say it, but it's taking an older generation to die away with a new generation where the understanding and the teaching and the way that they handle these sort of situations is going to be easy and better and the right way of doing it. Like I hate to say it, but it's going to be, well, not my kids because I don't have any, but other people's grandchildren are going to be the ones that are going to be the first to finally go, we need to have as much funding for mental health as we do for our bloody military.
Yep, exactly.
Instead of, right? Like, and then the acceptance and the understanding of it and making it available to everybody, not just the wealthy or the ones that have benefits or like everybody should have the ability to have it. And it's going to take a future generation or the ones that are just starting to grow up to make the change, because they're the ones that are going to see the seriousness of this and how it affects society.
Exactly.
And until that happens, unfortunately, we're still going to be behind and we're struggling to catch up.
Yep.
Yeah, it sucks, but that's reality. That's just the reality of
Well,
it.
I mean, you look at it, we're getting through generations where mental health was just not talked about.
Yes.
So we're really behind and we're playing catch up. And there are still people that don't accept mental illness as a real thing.
Yeah.
Or understand the severity of it. So it's going to take time like you said, it'll take a couple generations.
Yeah. And I don't like it, but that's just the reality of it.
Yeah.
There's so many examples out there that show that that's just the way it is, unfortunately.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's it. I know we could keep going. But,
I know it's like an hour and 44 minutes later.
Yeah,
it looks
that's
like,
a pretty,
and it's like
pretty good episode length.
Okay, we probably need to make this 2 episodes just so people will listen.
Yeah, no kidding. I may have to do that. Yes. All right. Well, Jeanette, thank you for coming on to the show. I really appreciate having you here. And it was very informative and a lot of fun talking about ADHD and emotional regulation.
Same. I had so much fun. Every time we've talked, I feel like we could have just kept going.
Absolutely. I know.
So
It's
ever
one
want to
of
do
those
it again,
things.
let's go for it. I'm down.
Yeah. And the irony is it's ADHD, you know, attention span.
I know, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's the fun of it.
I absolutely. And I know people, if they really want to listen, they will find ways to make it work.
Absolutely.
I do. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, thanks a lot. And yeah, we'll definitely have to do this another time and discuss more.
All right. Great. Talk to you soon.
You bet. Thank you.
Bye.